It's now my pleasure to welcome to the stage Steve Ballmer. You all know Steve Ballmer as the former CEO of Microsoft, of course, and the owner of the LA Clippers. But he's done something really interesting. It's the reason I wanted him here this morning, ahead of the midterms. He founded a project called USAFacts that is a nonpartisan effort to create a look at revenue and spending across federal, state, and local governments. Think of it as a 10K for America. No one has done this before Steve did it, and he has now a better sense, because of it, than just about anybody I know about the issues that are really pressing on Americans ahead of these elections. And so as we grapple with issues like taxes, health, and immigration, I want to hand over the stage to Steve. I'll come on back after where he's going to talk to you about what we're all thinking and what we should be thinking. Steve Ballmer. Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
I'm honored. Thanks. I'm honored to have a chance to be here with you today. As Andrew said, I've spent the better part of 4 years trying to understand where government gets its revenue, where it spends its revenue, and since we're not talking about a corporation, what kind of outcomes government's getting for the spend that it puts in. For today, we decided to take just a few of the issues that are in front of us and look at them by the numbers. No conclusions, that's not why I'm here. I'll just give you some numbers that help frame the issue, and you can always go to USAFacts.org to get even more numbers. Let's take a little bit of a look to start at immigration. A lot is being discussed in immigration. Some of the issues have to do with asylum and refugees. I didn't choose to focus in on that, but the data is available. Let's just take a look at border security, one of the things that is most talked about. In my view, as a current business person also, you start with the numbers. What is the issue? First, let's use only government numbers. They're the things we can trust most. That's the stuff that somebody's laughing, but the truth of the matter is, if government doesn't trust its own numbers, I have no faith whatsoever in this country going forward. And if we don't, let's invest in the quality of the numbers. Undocumented immigrants, this is an estimate from government, has gone since 2005 from 10.5 million to 12.1 million people. An interesting rise. It had been a little flat, has ticked up recently. The number of border agents, people we have monitoring our borders, has gone up from 4,000 to 19,000, a significant increase. And if you assume the average burden cost of a border agent is, let's call it $100,000, you'll find a very large expenditure per year in border agents. The number of people apprehended at the border has gone down from 1.7 million people a year to 300,000 people a year. What do we make of this? As we think about policy, are we trying to get the number of undocumented immigrants down to zero? That's highly unrealistic and prohibitively expensive. Yes, politicians can pontificate on both sides about how open or closed our borders should be, but ultimately we have to make decisions of what we're trying to do by the numbers and what we're willing to invest. Whether you believe in a wall or don't believe in a wall is relatively inexpensive, and I'm not saying that's a good thing or bad thing. The proposed wall cost is relatively inexpensive compared to border agents. But border agents have a lot of advantages that physical infrastructure doesn't. So how to think about this problem? Why do we have more border agents today and fewer apprehensions and a rise in undocumented immigrants? And there's a lot of theories you could have around that. You could say, hey, are the border agents less effective than ever before? Where are we? How to think about it. Some numbers to frame the question. If we take a look at healthcare, another hot topic, it is interesting. In inflation-adjusted numbers, we've gone from about $3,000 per person in healthcare costs in 1980 to $9,500 today. Now, a lot of people say, okay, how do we assess that? Let's assess through life expectancy. Well, life expectancy is a little bit like a forward-looking statement in a 10K. Let's talk about the actuals. The actuals are, at what age are people dying? particularly as a 62-year-old man, I'm very interested in the age at which people are dying. And you would think that massive investment we've made in healthcare would extend life. And yet since 1999, the average age at which people die has only gone from 72.3 years to 72.9 years. How much are we really buying for healthcare spend? Where should it be paying off? How do we think about that? As we talk about more people being eligible, that's a great thing. As we talk about the cost structure, are we getting our bang for the buck? Up to everybody to decide on their own. People then, in that context, say, how do we control healthcare costs? Well, if you look at it today and just the amount of money spent on health insurance, so this doesn't include out-of-pocket money, it doesn't include healthcare research, but just on healthcare spending, insurance spending, only about 4% is in direct purchase, and it has been going up in terms of cost per head. That's where you'd get the exchanges and some of that kind of purchase coming in. Employer-provided healthcare is the single biggest piece. It's about 40%, and you can see it has risen to about almost $5,300 per person per year. Interestingly, Medicaid and Medicare, the two that are most in the news, they are the biggest numbers, probably not surprising, at least in the case of Medicare. And yet they have sort of, if you will, gotten under control, at least in cost per head, and those numbers flattened out well before the ACA. What do we make about this? What do we make about how government regulates and structures the healthcare industry? Healthcare is about, something like 18% of the US economy today. Are we getting the bang for the buck? Who can help us control costs? What is government's role in the regulation and availability of health care? There's plenty of numbers that you can use to assess how our government leaders are doing, and our government leaders, in my opinion, should be using as they drive decisions. When Larry and Andrew are talking about the deficit and how it's exploding, there are a lot of issues that contribute. We're not going to talk, at least I'm not going to talk about the deficit today, and yet certainly healthcare and healthcare spending is a big part of the issue. Let's talk about wages, another big part of the election. And what does that look like? Probably a couple of salient facts. Number one, if you compare back to 2001, when 62% of the people over the age of 16 are working, that number today is 59%. Some people say that has something to do with unemployment. Well, of course, unemployment is near record lows. So what does this represent? It could represent the aging of the population. It could represent other criteria. If you look at what people are getting paid, the median income, $37,690 in the middle, and then you see various occupations. Food preparation, the lowest wage job. These are all stacked by wages. You can see on the right side, $20,000 on up to $100,000. The jobs that are growing below the median income, food prep, home health aides and other personal care, sales, cashiers, etc. Those jobs in aggregate have added 5.4 million since 2001. The higher than median income paying jobs have added 9.2 million. Bravo! Our economy is in many ways working well. My wife and I focus philanthropically on kids who are born in circumstances where they might not have a lot of upward mobility. And then you have to look at some of the lower wage jobs. $15 an hour, I think today's the day Amazon's $15 an hour goes into place. And if you look at it, you go slightly below the median wage and you can ask, are all of those jobs going to benefit? And how many of them would be displaced? Well, certainly home health aides, people preparing foods at McDonald's. I'm not suggesting we raise or don't raise the minimum wage, but there's an interesting set of things you can look at by the numbers. Last thing I want to just hit briefly is a look then at income. There's not a one-to-one mapping between people's income and the amount of income they file as a household. People file in various ways. We have seniors. We have single people without kids. We have single people under 65 with kids. We have married people without kids. We had married people with kids. Who's poor? Well, if you have a big, fat, red or pink thing at the bottom, a higher percentage of that population is poor. Single without kids, ironically to me, much surprising to me, is the single least affluent population. They account for the largest part, they and single with kids are the two largest parts of the bottom 20%. If you are married, things look pretty good. Part of the reason why median income is coming down has to do with family structure. The elderly have grown from 18% to 22% of the population. Single people with kids has gone from 32% to 34%. And people who are married has come down precipitously. Lot to think about, lots of ways to use the numbers to look at some of these critical issues. Last thing I'll say is we've been running a poll. This is not government numbers, but what do people care about? And ironically, people do care about the facts. The number one issue in America where people say, what is problematic as we do decision making, even beyond difference in political beliefs, is people using different facts. Last year, that was 54 to 46. This year, 61% of people said it's facts, not people's personal political views that are the number one thing that divide us. And with that, I'll wrap and look forward to some questions. Thank you. 11 minutes, sorry.
I appreciate it. Thank you. That was fascinating. And where I wanted to pick up this conversation was actually on this last slide about facts. Because we live in an age where people talk about fake news and the role of social media in really persuading people of different views. And you have lived in the world of technology for so long. A, are you surprised by that? Do you think that's actually right, meaning that people actually do care ultimately about facts? And what do you think that we or Silicon Valley or the world of technology needs to do if that really is the case?
Well, I'm not going to swear. This is our poll with Harris, so I'm not going to swear to it the way I would government numbers. On the other hand, I believe it. I think people do actually care about facts. You could say, what are facts? Numbers help to be more factual. So I'm going to believe that people care. The other thing which we found in our poll is people will say social media is their number one news source, and people will also tell you social media is the least trustworthy news source out there. There's a conflict in there.
But that's an interesting thing, and we're going to be talking to Evan Spiegel from Snap and Sundar later from Google. What do you think the industry, to the extent that's an issue, needs to do about that?
I think, and I'm not saying it's not happening today, but it's got to really be a job one for the tech industry, the people involved in social media, in search, to say, hey, look, what do we do about this? How do we use the much vaunted artificial intelligence to try to suss out what is real, what isn't, and not get in the way of free expression?
But if the public is so interested in reading media or articles or whatever it is that they say are biased and they don't believe, what do you do about that? And that's sort of a very interesting free market problem.
It is a good free market problem. I think people are telling us they prefer to read things that are true. It's just social media is so easy to consume these days compared to everything else.
Right. When you started this project, you've now seen reams of data. What was the most, is there one piece of data you thought was the most surprising of all of it? Was there ever a day you went home to your wife and you said, you're not going to believe this?
Yeah, I think the single most depressingly surprising thing is that only 33% of third graders can read at grade level. 33% are proficient in the third grade in reading. That to me was very surprising and very depressing.
You're involved in philanthropy and investing in all sorts of different things. There's lots of different investors, both people who are hoping to make lots of money and also people who are involved in NGOs here. Is there any data that you saw that actually moved you to do something with your money?
Yeah, it's interesting. We started this project when my wife said to me, "You've retired from Microsoft. Dude, let's get busy philanthropically focused on kids." I was a little tired, and I said, why do that? Let's just pay our taxes. Easy for us to say. It's easier for us to pay our taxes than it is for most people. And I said, government will solve the rest. She said, we can do better than that. I snuck off to study these numbers, and I wound up figuring out two things. Number one, you can do better than government, but government does put up most of the money that's going to help less advantaged kids. About $1.3 trillion a year get pumped into less advantaged people, kids, adults, et cetera, and we got to make that money work harder for this society.
What is the Ballmer family view of our economy today? Not the numbers, but the way you think about this. We just had a conversation with Larry Fink about it. I'm
kind of a long-term thinker. I basically own two things, S&P index funds and Microsoft. Microsoft, as Louis Tiant, the baseball pitcher, once said, been very, very good to me recently. As I think about the economy, I see more downside than I do upside. As Larry spoke, I can't imagine interest rates staying at their current rate very long. Interest rates will drive down asset values. That'll affect the more affluent less than the less affluent. Less affluent people don't borrow as much money, ironically, as more affluent people. So I don't, foresee excellent things ahead. In the longer run, sure I do. That's why I own equities and only equities.
What about tech? Tech landscape right now. Both as an investor and just a thinker about it.
I think there's a lot of interesting work, and I think there are some big things happening technologically that will unleash so much. AI was a big word when I started in tech. Then it became a discredited word because we were talking about AI before its time. Now it's back. And I really believe in the concept, and I've believed in it for many years. How do machines enhance your ability, any person, to do something you want to do? And I see so much more opportunity for that.
Where are we? People talk about the AI war, and you're going to be hearing about AI ethics in a little bit on this stage, but the AI war between the US and China. Would you bet on Alibaba or Microsoft?
Microsoft.
But
you challenge me a little higher. I'd even bet on, guys like Amazon and Google. Blah, blah, blah. Not just Microsoft. I'd bet on the US.A, baby.
Because what?
Because our current policies attract the best and the brightest from around the world to this country. The best Russian engineers, the best German engineers, the best Chinese engineers, the best Indian engineers. Can you really bet against, and of course, the best American engineers? You can't bet against that.
Okay, controversial question for you. And we'll talk to Sundar about this one as well. Microsoft has chosen to work with the Defense Department here in this country on some AI projects that Google has chosen not to. Amazon has chosen to. This gets back to this whole intersection of business and policy. What do you think the right answer is on some of these issues? Do you think Microsoft's making the right call?
Does anybody in this room pay their taxes? Oh, you're all betting on the US Department of Defense. Why is it the tech vendors shouldn't bet on the US Department of Defense when everybody here is? And in a sense, letting our Defense Department be as good as it can be is what we should all want as long as we're willing to fund it as citizens.
Two final questions from me, and then I really want to open it up. And also I want to show something that everybody can go home and do in just a bit. I want to ask you the distinction or difference between being a CEO of a big tech company and the CEO and owner of a basketball team.
Oh, big difference. Basketball owners are actually held accountable. CEOs are not. I used to think it was kind of the other way around, but your CEO can come into the quarterly call and say, we're going to get it next time. We lost the other day, and there's no way to say, oh, we'll get it back. No, we got one in the loss column. CEOs say it's about teamwork. Every 24 seconds, a basketball team is measured by its teamwork. We all have secrets in business that nobody knows. Everything that I know about our team, fans can know on the internet. It's a scary level of accountability And I'm half joking, and I'm more than half serious.
Okay, final sports-related question, and we will open this up. Paul Allen passed away just recently. And I know you worked with him and probably had a complicated relationship, I think is maybe a fair way to say it.
No, I had a really, actually not.
But he helped you or pushed you to buy the LA Clippers, which raises the question, there is going to be a football team that might become available in your home city. Is this something that you might want to buy?
Well, I do want to say one thing. Paul is a good friend. Nothing complicated for me about that. And Paul did a great service to the city of Seattle by keeping the Seahawks in our town. I want to make sure the Seahawks stay in our town. I think Paul's family wants that to happen. I don't think they need any help from me. But at the time that might become an issue, I'm sure many buyers will look at it. I have enough sports, but I am also interested, as Paul was, in making sure that team never leaves Seattle.
Okay, fair enough. Finally, let's just show people on the screen, because this is something you can do tonight. And if you're thinking about voting, and I hope you are next week, you should take a look at this. Can we show on the screen something that's actually on the site? And maybe you can explain it better than I can.
Yeah, we call it Voter Center. You can enter in your zip code. We'll show you the candidates. We've scraped all of the websites from the candidates to capture their points of view. We've supplemented their points of view with the data that exists, numbers that exist factually on any issue. So here you can see foreign policy, passports, foreign aid. We show you the numbers that are relevant next to a candidate's position. So you can, if you want to touch on Kristen Gillibrand, and you'll see her positions on the left, and on the right, you will see relevant data. So we click on education. Here's the education data right next to her positions on the issues.
Okay, I wanted everyone to see that because I know we have some, it's a business crowd. We have data nerds. They want to see this stuff, so thank you for that. Why don't we open it up, because I know there are so many questions in this audience for Steve. And we have a hand right here in the front here. We'll go, you can go to him right here, and then I'll come down to here.
Greetings, Bill Myers with Liberty Global. Tim Cook was in Brussels a week ago, and he talked about data, protect privacy as a human right. Curious to get your perspective on how personal data is being used today by a lot of these big platforms and the position that Microsoft has historically taken.
Yeah, I don't want to comment about where Microsoft is today. I can give you almost 5 years out-of-date news, so I don't want to do that. I can give you an opinion based upon kind of my view of the world. I think there are two basic cases. If you have an understanding with your customer that you're going to keep their data private, that lives above everything else. If you have an understanding with your customer that their data will be used in perhaps anonymized or non-anonymized form for other purposes, and you're clear about what those are, and your customer can assess that, that's also fair. The problem is you get into confusion between those two endpoints. And I think it is incumbent, particularly on the people who sell advertising, to try to be able to be crisp and clear on what their real privacy statement is to their users. I know that's a very hard problem from my time at Microsoft. It's very hard to describe what's going on technically in a way that users will understand, but to me that's the fair trade. And there are certainly people who give up their privacy in order to get a free service. There's no question about that.
I think we had another question right here in the front.
Thank you very much. Andrew Baldas from BGD Holdings. I'm very interested in your views. You laid out 3 facts, one of which was that 33% of third graders do not match up in reading levels. And you talk about vast changes, which I empathize with and I'm invested in technology, which is yet to come. And we talk about 1.3 trillion being spent in portions on education. What does the future hold if you have this kind of tectonic changes in the offing and a body of human capital so inadequately positioned vis-a-vis something you and I and everyone here, I suppose, share deeply in, the idea of betting long-term on America. What does that portend? I'm interested in your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah. I may have misspoke. It's about $600 billion out of $5.7 trillion of government spend that goes into education as opposed to other programs for the disadvantaged. My personal belief is, yes, our schools need to be better, but a lot of the issues that face kids that get in the way of educational performance are actually outside the classroom. Does my mom have the time to stay at home? Is she able to read to me during that time? Am I prepared that way? We've invested in a program at the University of Chicago to take a look at new technologies to try to help kids get exposed to more words when they're younger. When you get to older grades, is the issue that you don't want to go to school or you have to stay home in the morning to take care of your younger brother or sister, or mom's boyfriend beat her up last night and you were absent for the day as you try to help mom. So I think there's a whole set of things that we need to invest in that don't look directly like pedagogy if we're really going to move those numbers.
Okay, I think we had one more final question. Byron Wien, right there. Byron.
Thank you. Steve, I'm looking at some figures that show that China is going to be spending more money on research and development than the U.S. starting next year. I don't know if you see that same data, but China has a very vigorous program, Made in China 2025, where they want to be the leader in digital technology, biotechnology. If they achieve that goal, and if we are really underspending them, we're going to lose our competitive advantage. Do you see it the same way, or do you not trust those figures?
I probably don't trust the figures, but the point is still well worth discussing. I do believe that R&D spend is a critical part to economic growth for the country, for individual businesses. I do think R&D spend, we wouldn't spend an infinite amount of money. So the question is, what's appropriate? Central government policy in China might get you there. I'm still a big believer that capitalism will get you to the right level of R&D spend also. If you take a look at successful US companies, some of it is because of their R&D spend. Some of it is because they had the right idea, not because they hemorrhaged R&D spending. And some of it is they understood how to popularize the product. We are lucky. We still own the biggest domestic market in the world, and that allows our companies also to get their products to critical mass and learn faster. So yes, I can be somewhat alarmed, and yes, I can recognize the assets, which I think are even stronger, that we have in this country.
Steve Ballmer, everybody, thank you. Thank you so, so much.
Thanks. It's fun.
Thank you.